It's time to do the retopology of the model. This is a very practical chapter, and this is the really good stuff in the tutorial, I think, because it's a huge step, and a lot of guys are really curious about retopology. So just let me put a little disclaimer here. This is not going to be animation ready topology. It can be animated, and it's going to be all right, but it will mostly be to preserve the volumes of the face. This is not a tutorial on animation ready topology, just so that's absolutely clear. So with that said, let's get started with this. We're going to go to the topology tab here. You can just hold down Control and Tab to get this up. And we just go into topology. And then under settings, we're just going to enable a couple of things. We're going to enable topology mode, toggle verts, constraint to background. And that's pretty much it for the settings we're going to use. For the tool, we're going to stick almost exclusively to the topology pen tool. We have a lot of other tools here, but we're going to stick almost exclusively to this one because it's a really good one. It's a very multifunctional tool in Modo, which is amazing. A lot of tools in Modo, or most tools in Modo, are purely like single function. They can do one thing, but this can add loops, it can move stuff around, and it can extend loops. It's a really solid tool. So retopology in Modo is generally a very pleasant experience. I don't use anything else when I do retopology. I stick pretty much purely to Modo. So the first thing we do is we make a new layer. Just call this retopo. And just put a new group here called MDL underscore group. So now we have it's clean from day one. Let's just put this in the group as well, the hair, which we made in the last video. And now it's a clean container, it's a clean layer containing nothing so far. So let's just activate the topology pen tool. And a really good resource here is, this might sound obvious, but the help directory found in Modo, which is found here. You just Google a Modo 91 or whatever version you're using, wiki or help, and you get this up here. And then you can just search for topology pen tool. And here you have all the documentation you're ever going to need. What's going to be useful here is this. This is the overall hotkeys. So for instance, left clicking will move stuff around. Right clicking will move an edge loop, and so on and so forth. I'll show this in practice right now. We can create geometry in a lot of ways here. We can add a plane, or we can use the pen tool, topology sketch all that. But frankly, I just stick directly to the topology pen and just hold down Control and drag something out. Sometimes you get some funky results like this. So it can be a bit unpredictable sometimes, but I find it to be pretty nice if you drag from the left to the right. And you get these nice squares. The other way, this is from right to left, can give you a bit funky results. So left to right. That said, if you do get something like this, there's no problem at all. We can just move it around like this. And if you have flipped normals like this, you can just hit the F key and you're going to flip the normals. The way you extend something out here is simply by holding down right mouse button and shift. And now you can just drag it out. And that's pretty much it what we're going to use for the majority of the time. We're going to drag stuff out, hold down the shift key, and we're going to move it around using the left mouse button. If you hit left mouse button, or in this case there's a tablet and just clicking, you can just move the entire thing around. If you hit a point or vert, you just move that around. And the next obvious thing is if you hit an edge, it's going to move the edge around. And that's it for... That's a brief introduction to the tool, but in terms of theory, how we're actually going to approach this. We're going to approach this by laying down a really blocky foundation. We're not going to go into specific topology early on. This is going to be very rough as a first pass, because it's a lot easier to connect the various bits if it's rough. Just a little pro tip here as well, if you hit Control-1, we get up this little pie menu with lights and a couple other things like grid work plane. I don't want the work plane here, so let's just disable that. It gives me nothing here. And just save the scene. Control-Shift-S, or file save as, and just keep saving it. And now we just drag it out. I'm going to just drag loops around the big areas. And retopology is a very quick process if you do it, if you know what you're doing. You can retopology as a head like this in about an hour or so. I mean, granted that you're not doing animation retopology. I'll do another one. And this is going to be the nasolabial fold, which is the fold going here. This is something a lot of guys ignore when they're sculpting. So just add this around here. I'm just going to add the major volumes here. And I'll explain more about the tool as we go along. I'm just going to explain exactly what we need so you're not overloaded with information. And I'm only going to do one side. That's why I keep the sculpt pretty much completely symmetrical, apart from like some minor asymmetry in this region here and then forehead. The eyes and everything is completely symmetrical up to this point. So after this video, we're going to take it into ZBrush and we're going to reproject it there. And then we're going to add asymmetry to it. Just extend stuff out and just add big chunks of polygons around. If you hold down Shift and right mouse button on edge, you can extend the entire loop like this, which is really handy. So that's Shift and right mouse button. I mean, right now we only have 2, but if you have like 10 or 15, you can really quickly just do this. If you hold on Shift and middle mouse button, you can add a loop like this. That's what I need in this case here. So just Shift and middle mouse button. And now you can just extend this out. And when doing this, I am thinking about how we can connect this up later on. Keep extending it. And when you're doing retopology, or in topology in general for anything organic, try to keep it very nice and quadded. Meaning, keep it more like this, more like squarish than rectangular. This is fine for now. We're going to fix this later on. But when you do the final topology, make sure it's all as square as possible. It's like if you want to draw in Photoshop, and the pixels are elongated. I mean, it wouldn't work. So if you're trying to sculpt in ZBrush later on, and the polys are stretched, it's like painting with stretched pixels. We can also just disable and enable hair. That's one of the good things about keeping this as a separate mesh. So now we can just quickly just disable the various parts. So for instance, the eyes and the shirt, which you don't need. Just extend this out. And I'm really not going to worry too much about the back of the head here, as it's going to be covered in hair. Just move this around. You can also hit right mouse button and just move this around as well. Same with lips. Control and just drag when nothing is selected will give you a nice quad. And this is important that this flows around the lips. We can't do this and then just extend this down. This needs to flow around the lips. And one of the reasons I'm keeping my mesh relatively smooth or low when it comes to details in ZBrush is because there are a lot of regions we will have to re-sculpt. That's just the way it is. Because when you reproject stuff, there is no way that you can accurately project everything. Because this topology here is not going to be 100% accurate. And now you just have to be careful that stuff doesn't snap together. So in order to do this, just zoom far in and just make sure it doesn't snap together. Because we want these points to be relatively close. And as a pro tip when you're doing topology for lips, keep the same amount of spans on the top as you do on the bottom. That's just going to make stuff like more elegant and easier down the line. And it's going to give you better deformation as well. So if you see that a lot of your stuff is really not aligning to the center line, you can select all the verts. Let's just, I prefer to use the lasso. So that's a right mouse button, lasso style, and just lasso. And just select them all. Sorry, you have to be in vertice mode, not polygon mode. I use spacebar to toggle between these. And now we can hit F2 to bring up the modeling menu. And go to vertex and set position. Set position will do exactly that. It will give you a position for each vertex. If you hit 0 on this, so that's set position, and just hit 0, it's going to put them exactly in the center. So if you go to the front view now, you can see they're perfectly centered. So use the topology tool, or topology pen. I also mapped it to a marquee menu here, which is really handy. I also actually have all this stuff here, like, let's see here. I'm just going to move this around a bit. Move it a bit around. I've also set my snap it to 0 as a menu as well, or as a pie menu. So now it's always going to snap to 0. And this marquee menu, or sorry, this pie menu, I come from Maya-land, where it's called marquee menus. In this pie menu in Modo, this will follow along with the tutorial. This is slowly starting to connect stuff up. But you can see we're using the same basic tools at all times. Very little fancy stuff here. Just adding it slowly in. So if you're unsure what a hotkey for something is, let's just go back to this one, and we can just clearly tell here. So use the help menu in Modo. It's very well documented, at least certain features are. And I highly recommend just reading through it there. Even if you think you know how something works, just go through the help menu. And you can totally just do big polys as well. We will have to turn them into something more square later on, but for now this is fine. We're just going to block it out. You really don't want to start out with two small polygons. That's going to make it very hard later on. I've done that a lot of times, and every single time I just regret it. Let's add some topology here for the nose. I want to have a loop which goes around here as well, so it's kind of looping into this here. If you want to delete something, just hit Control and middle mouse button on it. So I want this to loop around here. Shift middle mouse button to add a loop like this. And here I simply have to add some topology in order to support the shapes here. And again, big polygons to stretch them out. So, as I said before, a lot of guys, they add asymmetry before they retopologize. I really prefer to do this, to add asymmetry afterwards, because it keeps my life a lot easier. Particularly when it comes to arms and legs and limbs in general, because you really want to do two sets of arms and all that. And by having the mesh be completely symmetrical, you can do tons of cool stuff with it. For instance, if you're If you're doing weight painting, you can mirror the weights from left to right. You can mirror texturing from left to right because your UVs are going to be symmetrical. So it just has a lot of advantages. So I would only use an asymmetrical mesh if you really, really have to. For instance, if it's a completely asymmetrical character, like then I would do that. But unless it's a requirement for the character to work, try to keep it symmetrical. And also as a pro tip, if you hit O on the keyboard, O for obvious, then you get up all the viewport settings or viewport properties. So under shading here, we have wireframe overlay. Sometimes this is set to colored or uniform. You really don't want this on. This is really bad because if you look at this, you can't see what's going on at all. So hit O and set this to none. This is very important because otherwise you're working in the blind. So when doing this, what I'm thinking about is purely, does this support the volume? And I'm not thinking about animation because this will not be animated. If you are doing animation, you have to do animation tests. You have to test the topology. Will the topology support what I need the character to do? In this case, it needs to do nothing, so it's perfect. We could, in theory, actually like just do a quick zero measure of this, and it would be fine. It's just a bit naughty. we want to do the head properly. Just even if it's just for practice, because in theory this could deform. And I will be very disappointed in you if you do use zero measure for a head. Very disappointed. And this is a good skill to have as well. The problem now with with software being a lot easier, for instance, topology today, this is kind of easy to do. It's not very hard compared to the way it was 10 years ago when I started out with 3D. Then you had to cut everything in without using topology. You had to start with plane modeling and box modeling, and that was really hard stuff. I mean, this here is relatively easy. So the problem with that is when a lot of guys learn 3D, they skip over like the real foundation, which is polymodeling. You know, you need to be able to go crazy and just understand volumes without having a mesh like this. You need to be able to do proper box modeling. Otherwise, you're just in trouble, because the moment you don't have a mesh or like a zebra sculpt to support you can't model. So that's a problem with a lot of newcomers today. They can only model in ZBrush or sculpt in ZBrush, and they can only retopologize using zero measure or other auto retopology tools. When doing this here as well, I'm trying to keep a loop which goes across here, which goes horizontally across the head. You do get better deformation this way. Like as I said before, this is not an animation tutorial or animation ready topology, but it's just nice to follow some general guidelines. We still want to be able to do some deformation. And I'm sort of not narrating exactly what I'm doing at all times, because I'm just doing the same thing over and over again now. I'm just looking at volumes and I'm just adding form to shape this. Looking at the anatomy here, the trapezius, just adding something which supports that. Adding loops. So if this was a pure beginner tutorial, we would definitely go through every single step. We would go through every single polygon and how to set up Modo perfectly. But as this is not a 101 how to use Modo tutorial, we're not doing that. This is more tutorial on how to the approach for a character, which I think is far more important, because you can learn tools from watching documentation, but you can't learn the approach from just reading documentation. You can't learn the character approach there. So just going a bit all over the place as well. I don't get too locked down on one region. So same reason as when you sculpt, you really don't want to get too bogged down on one region because you get too focused on that. So the principles we went over in sculpting, they're all valid here. Start from general to specific. That's it. That's pretty much the essence of good 3D. That's like a note you should just get like print it out and have in front of your bed or something, like general to specific. I've been doing a lot of teaching as well, and that seems to be the number one thing students mess up. They start from specific and then they try to do some generalist stuff, but it doesn't work. So same thing as before, just using the set position, set to 0. This is just a macro I've made, which is really handy. But you can also just go here, as I said before, select the edges here, and just set position. Oh, did you see what I did there? This is really cool. This is a feature which has been in Modo for years, but they recently just like put it to a hotkey by default. So if you hold down the Shift key and right mouse button and hover over a point and then click. So click one point and then right mouse button or click in this one. It's going to select a range in between. So let me just show you how this is really cool. Let's say you want to select all these polygons here. You can just select this point there and this point there, and it's going to select the entire thing. This is really cool and super useful. You're going to use this all the time once you know it's there. And I've been doing this for years and years, even before they introduced it in, I believe, Modo 8.1 or 9.1. Just delete the light I accidentally created. And save the scene. Control S. And let's just start to connect some stuff up here. And you can see I'm avoiding the ear, because the ear is daunting. Nobody likes to do an ear in 3D like this. To be frank, when I'm doing ears like this, I just steal an ear from a former model I made and just paste it in, because ears are almost the same on every single model. There is only proportion change. Of course, right now we will do it properly. I will actually retopologize the ear like you should. But it's just real annoying. Same way if I'm doing hands or something like that, I would probably just steal that from an older model. Just because it's more efficient, and hands don't really change that much from person to person. It's pretty much only proportion change. But that's, that's if you're doing a production model, or, if you're doing something where the focus is not to learn topology. If it is to learn topology, I mean, obviously you need to, do the topology. But I've been doing this for a while now. For personal projects, I don't have to do topology anymore, because I kind of know that. So then I just use whatever method I take. Whatever method is faster to get to my goal. So you can see I've literally only used topology pen tool here. Nothing else has been touched here. Not even the bridge tool. The bridge tool is awesome though. I'll show you the bridge tool in a bit. How you can use the bridge tool to be a real Modo ninja when it comes to retopology. Because that's a feature which a lot of guys actually don't know about. And I'm just going to leave this loop up here. I'll probably just delete it later on. So if you have an issue like this, like you can't really figure out how to connect this, just leave it. Just move on to something else. So I want overall coverage before I start really cleaning this up. For instance, I haven't touched the mouth or touched much of the mouth, the nose, and the eyes yet, because I want general coverage before doing that. So if there is interest in a very beginner tutorial on Modo modeling, please just send us an email, and if there is enough interest, we'll definitely consider that. Currently, though, we've just been focusing on project-based tutorials, or more like big ideas and workflow-based things, because this here is applicable in any software. I mean, if you use Maya or 3ds Max and all that, I mean, this approach is applicable to anything you do. We just happen to use Modo now, because Modo is a really good tool for this. And as for everything else, it's a good idea to get some reference of topology. Just search on something like polycount, the forum polycount, or just the MODO forums, and just find some good examples of topology. It can just really help you. It's like having a puzzle. It's like doing a puzzle if you know the answer. So I really want this loop here to, or this edge here to really follow this fold here, because then it's going to be defined in topology. So as a general rule, you want as much as possible to be defined by topology. You don't want to rely on displacement maps for big forms. If something is going to be animated, for instance, and you're relying on displacement maps, you're in big trouble right away. So displacement maps should be features which they affect the silhouette, but they don't really affect deformation. So what I would do in displacement here would be, for instance, like you see all these like nice lines here, and like all the small wrinkles around the eye here. I would all do that in displacement. But like the shapes around the eye here and the overall eye, the eyelids and all that, all topology. I would never ever do that in displacement. You can also just hold down Shift and the middle mouse button to drag out a loop like this. I sometimes do that. I showed you this feature before. I sometimes do that, but for most of the time like this, I just do one poly at a time. Because this way I control it. And control is a huge part when I'm working. I want to control as much as possible here. Which is also why I'm not too big of a fan of something like Sear Measure. Because I really don't have the control I require when I'm working. Save the model, Control S. And good topology like this can really speed up your work later on. For instance, if you do UVs and you have good topology, it's going to be so much easier. Particularly if you're doing a body. If you have bad UVs and you want to do a good body, it's going to be really hard to select the seams properly. And as with sculpting as well, look, take a step back, breathe, and just review your model from time to time. Never get too bogged down in details. General to specific. Remember that. Let's see if we can connect this in a clever way. You can also draw topology on top of your model here in something like Photoshop as well. If you're unsure or new to topology, that can be a really good way of doing that. Because if you get too high poly too quickly, it's like a puzzle which is impossible to solve, or at least really hard to solve. So, and it's a lot easier to plan out topology or plan out anything in Photoshop than it is in 3D. But once you were doing this well, you would just start right in 3D. And the cleaner your initial loops are, the cleaner everything is going to be down the line as well. So please keep everything clean from the very first moment. Because if you add let's say you have a loop like this, and the loop, you want to add a loop inside here, the loop is going to be messy. Look at this mess compared to if the loop is like this. Nice even loop. We just have a really nice even loop right away, which is going to be even all the way through. Just one loop here, because it's clearly not supporting the volume here. I'll use the edge slide tool as well in a little bit, just just to get rid of some of this stuff here. Because we don't need this loop here to go all the way back. We can pretty much terminate it right here. Let's add another loop here. Now you can see the loop goes, oh, there we go. This loop here goes all the way over around here now. So that's something you're gonna have to be really careful with when you're designing the loops. Where does it go? Because it's really easy to have something which kind of looks nice, but then once you start modeling it, it turns into absolute mayhem because you haven't planned your loops properly. So let's connect this up here. You generally want, this is going to sound obvious, but you generally want more loops where there is a lot of form. As you simply need that to support it. So around here, if there's a curve, just add enough loops so the form is supported. I'm not sure if I like this. So I'm just going to add some cuts down here. And I know what you're saying, but Henning, you're creating n-gons. Yes, I am. Yes, sir, I am. N-gons, for those of you who don't know, is simply a polygon which has more than 5 sides, as opposed to a triangle or quad, which has 3 or 4 sides. So the bad thing about an n-gon is, first off, you don't really control it. For instance, here, if let's say we subdivide the model now, we just hit D on a model, and you see this polygon here, this one. Let's look at this one instead. This one turns into 4. So this is now into 4, and this is reliable. We know if we subdivide this, it's going to go here, and it's going to go there. This is going to happen every single time. But if you look at the n-gon, this guy, and hit D, it's going to do weird things. Because when you subdivide something, it's always going to turn into quads. Always. So if you have a lot of triangles and you have, let's just make a triangle and let's just make tons of nasty stuff here. Triangles, hey, triangle n-gons. Subdivide this, and boom, quad, 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 quad. It will always turn into a quad. But that's really bad because we don't just want quads. Having quads is all nice, but what we want at the end of the day is clean topology. So I added an n-gon here just so I can control this later on. Well, I'm going to fix it later on. I just want to add the topology here right now. Alright, so I think I'm going to have to abandon my idea of having the stern cloud mastoid in an edge loop. Because currently, this is kind of supporting it, but it's also making it really hard for me to control this. So if something isn't working, delete it out. Just don't be attached to your work. Just delete it out and start over. It's going to be way easier if I can just make this go down in a more, is fanning out instead of changing direction. Just going to delete some stuff here. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to just move this out. And apologies for constantly going up to creation menu here. I just rearranged my pie menu here. I used to have topology pen set to creation. So just bring this out. So I'm making this now loop around here. So I want one loop which goes like this, and I want one loop which goes like this, and one loop which goes around here. So this is a very nice and clean topology. Let's just select this, select all this, and then you just go to 0. Exactly, you know how to do this because I showed before. This is just going to F2 to get the model type up, vertex, and set position. I set this to 0. But I included my macro with this video, so fear not, child, fear not. I find it to be way easier to simply delete what's not working than to trying to fix something. That's like a general thing. Maybe not necessarily like life philosophy, but just like in 3D. If a sculpt isn't working, or if a model isn't working, a specific part, I just erase it and I start over. It might take like 2 hours to redo it, but normally when you redo something, it turns out stronger, but it might take 3 hours to fix it, 4 hours. So generally way easier to start with blank slate. So as you can see, I'm trying to do nice even topology here, but you kind of have a couple different passes you do. You have lay down the topology, then you have make it look nice. And I kind of keep doing this constantly. Lay down and make it look nice. And as we know, this guy has clothing on. So we don't have to care too much about this region here. I probably won't do too much more than this, because we're not going to work on regions which aren't going to be seen. This region here is getting a bit messy. So unlike the sculpting videos here, this is actually in real time, because I can kind of retopologize and talk at the same time. Well, because this is a technical exercise for me. This is not too hard for me. I've done this a lot, and I don't have to think too much. It kind of just goes with the flow here. But sculpting, I have to constantly think, and talking and doing really hard work. It's pretty hard for me. Same when I'm teaching as well. It's pretty hard for me to talk and do hardcore C-word stuff at the same time. So you can see already it's starting to get there. We have pretty much almost coverage over the entire model right now. There's a couple of regions left and we have coverage. So I probably wouldn't add the filtrum into the topology. The filtrum is simply like the triangle you have under your nose, or between the lips and the nose here. Probably wouldn't add that in topology, because it doesn't need to deform. You pretty much never have to deform your filtrum. That would be kind of weird. So here, let's say we have two choices here. We have either to merge this down like this, or we have the choice to bridge it together. In this case, or in most cases, I would merge it together, because this simplifies it down. And we can always add on a loop if we need to, like this. It's so easy to just add way too many loops. And editing a model once you have too many loops is really hard, like I stated a couple of times by now. You know, just making sure the points which are important are repeated. Just make sure that this is all centered. Something you can do as well, which is nice to do, is to have an instance showing the other side at the same time. I do think it's nice to not have that. That's just a personal preference, because then I can always just check how the model looks on the other side. I can just see the form without the instance. But that's something which is recommended. At least if that's your personal preference. Just create an instance and just scale it on -x, and you can see it on the other side. We're just going to mirror it over in the end. So here you can tell we definitely need more loops here, because this is a huge discrepancy between our topology and the model. And MODO sometimes can be hard to control when you have this shifted topology here. So just add a loop in and try to make it try to put it in the center. We definitely need another loop here. So as I said before, MODO is pretty good for topology. It's really good for modeling in general. I currently work professionally in Maya, but I still do most of my retopology in MODO, just because it's good. And Maya also has some pretty serious limitations, though it's getting better. But yeah, MODO is very nice for modeling, because it has advanced tools and they feel user-friendly, particularly the bridge tool, which I still haven't really shown you, which I'll do in a bit. Actually, let's just show you the bridge tool right away. Control S, just make sure. So in this case, I didn't really need it because this is a very low-res model. But something you can have a lot is, let's say you have this region here, there is nothing here. It's like 9 polys. And I mean, 9 polys is fine, but let's say we subdivide this a couple times. So now we have 56 polys here. We can even just grow the selection. So it's a lot more, it's like 130 polys. And delete. All right, let's fill this in. Fill it in by hand. Let's try this. This is a pain in the ass to do. This is a real pain in the ass. And if you're doing this in a lot of other software, we have to do it by hand, poly by poly, or you have to do some kind of bootleg tricks. MODO, however, is clever. So let's just select the edges here, the end edges, like this and this. And if you run the bridge tool now, you just find a bridge tool right over here. And if you just hit click, you can see what happens. It fills it in beautifully. So this is because if we have settings here, let's just try this, disable continuous bridge and auto connection. This is what happens if you use bridge tool normally. You just have to set the segments and you have to connect this up yourself. But if auto connection and the continuous bridge is on, it's just going to go bam, and there we go. Beautiful, beautiful connections. I mean, there are some regions here you have to fix, but that's fine. Let's just hope my undo stack can cover all this. Yes, it can. Otherwise, I would be in trouble. If my undo stack didn't work here, I would have to take it into ZBrush and use reconstruct subdivs, which would actually be kind of cool to show you, but kind of glad my undo stack held up. So that's the bridge tool for you. This is so useful. I mapped this to just Shift B. I use this a lot when modeling. And this is a huge strength in MODO compared to something like Maya. The bridge tool in Maya is shifty at best. It's almost to the point that you can't reliably use it. But the MODO bridge tool is actually one of the reasons I use MODO. Because Maya is gaining on MODO really quickly now when it comes to the tools. But until it has a bridge tool which can compete with MODO, I mean, there are just so many cases where something would take you like 10 seconds to do in MODO, and it would take you like 2 hours to do in Maya. And you're just going to do it in MODO. So I'm adding a bit more loops here now for the eye, because I want some control, or more specific control for the eye here. Again, try to space them out evenly. The more even they are, and the better your foundation is, meaning the first grid you put down like this, the first loop you put in, the better that is, the better the rest is going to be. So really spend time on this. It's like the methodology or the motto which I stick to, which is more work now, less work later on. So the more work you spend on your foundation, the better it's going to be later on, and the less work you're going to have to do. Seems like a lot of guys follow the mantra, more work now, more work later. But don't do that. Just make a solid foundation. So this here gets a bit tricky when it comes to topology here. Ideally, we would have custom control over this, meaning this loop here would go like this, and this would just go all the way over here. And if I had like more time and this was for animation, I would definitely do that. But we don't have time for that. So I'm just going to make this be all, or like round all the way around. Like this. So we have a continuous loop going around. This just keeps it very nice and clean. And as I said before, if you have problems with stuff snapping too much, just zoom far in. So now we have a loop going here. Select two edges and this. And this is a cool feature. If you hold down, if you hit the arrow keys left and right, you can just move loops in and out. Really handy. So now we can just see the loops going like this. You can do the same thing here. You can actually, you don't have to hit L first. You can just hit the arrow keys. A little pro tip for you if you didn't know. Back to topology pen. And now we just connect this up. So you can see when I laid out the loops here, I'm trying to kind of match what's already here. If it doesn't match 100%, that's fine, because we can terminate loops in the eye here. This is really nice. So if we need a loop here, we can always just add a loop like this. So this is a case where I'll use the right mouse button and just dragging, because now we can drag the entire loop. Instead of having to move one and then move one, just drag the entire thing at one point. Just add on the loop, shift middle mouse button. See how we can connect this up as well. Add another loop here. Just gonna have to space this out as well. Whenever you add a loop, try to just space it out right away. Actually, let's see if we can just delete this guy. Just delete this. And now we just can connect this to this. Yeah, there we go. A lot of these topology tricks you just learn after a while. In the beginning, when somebody's doing topology or like cutting and all that kind of stuff in front of you, it looks like pure magic. It looks like the person is just an absolute genius. I mean, not saying that this looks like magic, but you're going to get the hang of it very soon. You just have to do this for a little bit. Alright, so that's the eye almost done. We have another loop here, which we just have to terminate. And it's fine to have a couple of edges here around the caruncula. That's just what it's called. The region, this bit of the eye here, this region here is just called a caruncula. Specifically the shape here. Because there's a lot of shape going on there, and it's really important to really capture the shape here. A lot of guys keep just disregarding how important this shape here is, but it adds a lot of character to your model. The eyes in general really just need to be well done. If everything else is perfect but the eyes are weird, I mean it's going to be, you're going to screw the entire thing up. No pressure. And the way to do good eyes, to make good eyes, just look at a lot of reference. Like right now I have a mirror right next to my desk. Just have a solid mirror and just like, you know, buy something from IKEA or something. Just have it next to your desk. It's going to save your bacon so many times when it comes to creating a realistic human. So whenever I'm teaching and giving lectures and people want feedback on the work, the first thing I ask them is, where's your reference? And a lot of times they'll just look really guilty at me and they try to explain, no, but I don't need that. Or sometimes they'll just Google it. One guy was doing an old man, and I was asking, so do you have reference for this? And he just started Googling old man, and you know, you just busted. So just find reference initially. You can't create something realistic if you don't have reference, or stylized. I mean, when Disney and Pixar, they do their films, which are highly stylized, they use reference all the time. I mean, they go to zoo trips and like old trips all around the world because reference is really king. You don't have to match it 100%, but you have to base it off reference. So when I'm doing a project, I'm collecting like hundreds of pictures, just because that's so important. I usually spend, at least on spare time project, I usually spend like about 2 days just collecting reference, just drawing down some thumbnails maybe, and just writing a description of the character or the project. And I'm just doing a lot of pre-production. Again, more work now, less work later on. It seems like when films I'm working on, and when they have problems, it seems like that's always caused by rushing pre-production. Let's just add another loop up here. And we can just connect this up now. So you see, I'm trying to get these nice even quads like I was talking about before. And here we can see a kind of a cool trick now. Before I do that though, let's just add another loop here. So I don't want this here to go all the way up, because that's pointless. I don't need any of these two to go all the way up. So just delete them out and space this out a bit more. And now we can just do this. Click. Yeah, I find the edge slice tool to be slightly buggy in 901. It seems to get better if you hit disable multi-slice. Seems like that's still not entirely there. Multi-slice is nice though, because before in 801 and in former versions, you can't slice through multiple edges. So if you want to do this to here, like you can do in Maya for like 15 years or so, you can't do that. You have to enable multi-slice, and then you can do it. But sometimes it doesn't really work. But if you encounter that, please just report the bug to the Foundry, so they will be aware of it. Unless you're doing a tutorial, then you're a bit busy with that. You can also just use the move brush, or sorry, the sculpt brush, and just smooth stuff out a little bit here. Just relax it a little bit. Keep in mind that this does not snap it to the surface. The way I do that, to be honest, is just, I prefer to just use as few tools as possible. So I want to snap this to the surface again. I just use the retopoMODO pen tool, and now it just snaps back. You can just hit the polygons again. Then you're just going to snap. Because you really want your topology to match as closely as you can to the model. It's going to make it a lot easier in next chapter as well. We're going to reproject all the nice zebra sculpting back onto this. So you see now I'm trying to keep the same amount of spans on top here as I am on the bottom. So let's just add another guy here. And let's just deal with this later on. And this is a totally acceptable method to add n-gons like this, as long as you clean them up later on. And the way we can find n-gons is going under list. And on the bottom here we have statistics. Go to polygons by vertex, and here you can just see all the n-gons and all triangles. So we have exactly 400 polygons now. So this is just something we're going to have to fix later on. I'm not at all worried about this right now. There we go. So actually, let's just fix this right away. We do this the same way we fixed the other one. Let's see here. Let's just connect this all the way through, and then we can fix this one. So I mean, this is not terribly far off from an animation ready mesh, but I still can't advertise this as animation ready because I still haven't. This is not topology which is researched based on it being animation ready. But I mean, it would still work probably just fine. So I definitely need some more loops around the nasal labial fold, because currently you can see the lip volumes are not being supported at all. But it's fine, because this was just the first loop we laid down. So just move this around. So now you can see it's being supported quite a lot more. I still want an additional loop here though. I'm just going to fix this a bit first. So again, this is between like adding loops and refining it. So I do this in passes. And as with sculpting, like I said before, keep working on the entire thing. Then you definitely want more loops around the eyelid. Because imagine if the eyelid is blinking. I'm still thinking about animation, even though this is not going to be used for animation. Like imagine if the eyelid is blinking, you really want to have the supporting loops. Because otherwise it would be like a pure mechanical blink. We can also use the edge slide tool. The edge slide tool is amazing. We find this under here, this edge slide. Now we can just slide this across. I also map this to just the Shift Control Alt S because I use this so often. Just slide stuff around. You also have a list of all my custom hotkeys in your project directory. But if you're following from another application now, let's say you're not using Modo, which is totally fine. This is all valid. If you use Maya and you use a quad draw tool, this is all, the principles here are pretty much exactly the same. There's no voodoo here. I mean, this is just like, there's just like a background constraint and we're just pulling points here, adding points and refining it, adding a point and refining. So this should be applicable for all applications, at least if you're a more intermediate user. And because again, if you're a beginner and you're trying to follow, if you're my beginner trying to follow this, I mean, obviously that's not going to fly. But once if you're watching this tutorial just to understand the approach, this here is absolutely legit. This is the way we do it professionally as well. Maybe not for so much for heads, because we normally have pre-made base meshes, which we're just conforming to whatever we need. Because if we were to do this from scratch and everything head, we would lose so much information. For instance, if we've done like a set of blend shapes or morph targets in certain applications, as they're called, we can just do like one set of blend shapes and use them for everything. But if we were to do this, we'd have to redo the blend shapes for everything. We also have a base. We can also use a base set of textures, which is really nice. So if we need to just get a base of a new character, we just know we already have that, but keeping one base mesh. So I would recommend reusing one base mesh as much as possible. But obviously for learning purposes, you need to just do this. I mean, you really don't cheat yourself by using a base mesh you downloaded from the internet. For this as well, I think it's a bit annoying when in Modo that you can see everything here. You can see through here, and it gets really hard to read topology as something like the ears now because you see the topology back here. So what I do is I just hide the rest, which is select this and just hit Shift H to hide it, to hide unselected. This makes it a lot easier for me to drag this out here. And we're going to have to fiddle around a bit when it comes to actually connecting the ear, because the ear is a region which is really, really detailed when it comes to shape. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so it's not going to match. If you look at the rest here, this is like really low poly. So we're just going to have to connect it in a bit of a dirty manner. But that's fine, because ear is, along with a lot of other features, is not going to deform a whole lot. There might be some wiggle and all that, but it's not like the mouth, which is going to deform a whole lot. We're not going to articulate the ear, unless, you know, that's you're doing like a Dumbo movie or something like that. Something which really requires that. So I hate doing ears like this. There's so much shape going on, and it's just really annoying. So I said before, like if I were to do this like properly, or if I were to do this for my own project, I would just steal an ear from an older project I've done, because this is annoying to do. And the ears are also funny in a way, because if you look at like most of the shapes. If you look at most of the shapes on a human face, or when it comes to anatomy, everything is kind of logical in the sense that if you look at like the way abs are shaped, you know, it's all based on, can you move the torso around? How the arm is shaped? Can you move the arm up and down? Like, it's very mechanical. But the ear is just shape. Of course, there is logic to it. I mean, obviously, it's there because of evolutionary traits, but there is no immediate logic behind it. So it becomes less about understanding and more about memorization when it comes to the ear, which can be a bit tricky. I struggled with doing ears for quite some time because I didn't realize you just had to sit down and just like memorize the names and memorize the shapes. And that's hard. It's easy to understand it's easier to do something if you understand it, but it's really hard to do something if you just have to remember it.